following program on Other Derana 24 is classified for general audience. It is intended for all ages. It contains little or no violence, no strong language, and little or no sexual dialogue or situations.
Tonight, we discuss the intricacies of artificial intelligence and its implications on the legal climate in Sri Lanka. Is Sri Lanka's legal system adequately equipped to handle the rapidly growing technology, and what are some immediate concerns that need to be addressed? A very good evening, and thank you for taking the time to join us on yet another episode of Law, Land and Liberty, where we break down key legal concepts for the layman, and we discuss, of course, the developing legal concepts as well. And today's topic is something that I believe would be very interesting for our viewers watching at home, and that's on artificial intelligence. Now, I know artificial intelligence, every single day we see an update that it's a rapidly evolving technology, and so are the legislatures surrounding this technology as well. Well, to discuss this topic, we have someone that's not a new face on the show, and if you had been keeping up with our program, you would recall that last time we had a discussion of a similar nature, and that is attorney at law Thishya Weragoda. Sir, thank you very much for taking the time to actually speak to us once again on our program. Yes, it's an honor to have you once again, of course, and on this specific topic as well, because we touched on it a little bit briefly in our previous discussion. But before we get into the discussion, here is a little bit of a breakdown on how we're going to be approaching the topic. First, we'll talk about the basics of artificial intelligence and its context in Sri Lanka in the current sense, and how it's actually evolving right now. Next, we'll be talking a little bit about the international norms. We've seen a lot of legislature pop up recently as well, and regulations, and how that actually translates on a global and local context. And finally, we'll be talking about the future of AI and legislature in Sri Lanka, as well as content protection.
Hello, my name is Malitha Pereira, and I am an engineering student. My question is on AI. What does the current climate for the technology look like in Sri Lanka?
All right, well, without any further ado, we have quite a lot to discuss on this subject as well. Sir, I'd like to once again thank you for taking the time. This is a very unprecedented topic because we don't really have specifically developed laws and legislatures surrounding artificial intelligence, considering how artificial intelligence, while it has been in development for various years, has only popped up as much only recently. So could you get us into this discussion with a little bit of an introduction? So when it comes to artificial intelligence in Sri Lanka specifically, what does the climate for this technology look like at the present moment?
So I think keeping up with society, the advancement of technology around the world, artificial intelligence, whether we like it or not, is part of our scheme of daily activities, so to speak. For example, even a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old who wants to do some homework could say, go on ChatGPT and let's try to figure out an answer for this. I've seen that personally happening to kids. So whether we like it or not, kids are learning, so which means that us adults also have no choice but to figure out how to deal with this problem. I see it not only as a problem, I see that as a challenge also for society, because I think one of the key features of technology is that it keeps evolving at a very fast speed. So whether we like it or not, society has to adapt to it. We can't shut our doors and say, no, we are not going to accept it, or no, we are not going to accept it as a reality. But at the end of the day, whether it's photography, whether it's doing homework, whether it's coming up with a proper assignment, we seek assistance. Now, a couple of days ago, I saw that even for lawyers to do their research, there are chatbots powered by AI. So whether we like it or not, it's here to stay. And we must recognize that it's here to stay and adapt ourselves and see how law could help protect citizens in relation to AI.
Right, that is actually a perfect introduction as well, specifically when you mentioned that for better or for worse, this technology is not going anywhere, and if anything, instead of trying to resist it, we really need to learn how to adapt to this current situation that we're in, and to basically ride the wave is what I'm understanding from what you just mentioned, sir. In your opinion, do you believe that the rapidly evolving technology that is artificial intelligence poses more of a threat, or is it more or less of a threat when it comes to, of course, content protection, specifically like we mentioned last time, or even intellectual property? What do you think, sir?
Well, I think that one of the key features of technology, not just AI, is that law always plays catch up. You make a law today, by the time the bill goes through Parliament and it becomes law, the technology may have changed. We've seen that happening in Europe, we've seen that happening in the US, but one of the benefits that a country like Sri Lanka has is that we are very slow to react. So in reality, we might not see a law on AI for the next couple of years. For example, the data protection law was discussed for about 20 years before it became law. So we might not really, the law or the legal processes might not ride the wave, so to speak. So we'll watch everything happening, we'll see what happens in the US, we'll see what happens in the UK, wherever, and then we'll be like, yeah, we can react to it. Maybe like one of those slow internet browsers that you get.
Right, we're not going to mention any names, of course.
We're not. But the reality is that, I mean, we are regressive in that sense in making law about technology.
Right, so it poses more of an advantage despite it being an inherently negative trait, the fact that we have a little bit of a slow process for legislative and legal aspects, of course, and lawmaking. Do you believe that the game of catch-up, of course, is never over? We always constantly see updates, and therefore the law needs to be updated around the rapidly evolving technology. Do you believe that somewhere along the future, when we do introduce a law, do you think the climate for AI would have stabilized enough to that point, or do you expect it to be exponential?
Well, the problem again with technology is that it could be exponential or it could be very stagnant. If it's stagnant, it falls off. If it's exponential, it will continue. So AI is exponential in that sense. So I think the biggest issue we will have is that really understanding the problem. Sometimes it's an issue with having the real experts to come up with draft laws. Because we might just pick something that is there in one country and we might think that, okay, this is great, let's put it here. But we are not realizing the ground realities in Sri Lanka before we bring that into our system. Or it might already be redundant in that country and we will be importing something that is redundant as part of our law. So I wouldn't say that the exponential growth in AI is something that is necessarily a bad thing or necessarily a good thing. I would say that because we have this approach of let's wait and see, laws might not be there, but whatever that is available will be used to protect or to cover ourselves in such a situation. So for example, the intellectual property law would be used a lot of times. The data protection laws might come into play. Some aspects of the penal code might come into play. But we might not have a dedicated law on this topic.
Right, so makeshift protections in varying pieces of legislature, we do have some semblance of some sense of protection when it comes to specifically the AI threat as well. You mentioned, sir, that just now, while we might be bringing in certain pieces of legislature that may not reflect our ground reality in Sri Lanka, what is the ground reality in Sri Lanka when it comes to artificial intelligence right now?
So we need to recognize the fact that AI is part of some of these multinational or large entities in Sri Lanka, from insurance to healthcare to all of that. We see when we call up on a hotline, we are assisted by AI-supported call centers to various things. Or if we look at, for example, I'll give a very simple example. If we take photography, this whole idea of what we call generative AI, this poses a serious issue to the legal field because images can be manipulated. Items may be added, items may be removed. So how do we deal with this? So in a sense, we might need some sort of system where the law also is amended to that effect, but I do not know whether it'll be fruition at any time soon.
Exactly. We do see, it's a slow uptake, but Sri Lanka is reacting to artificial intelligence.
Of course, certainly.
We've seen a lot of reaction in that regard. Thankfully, it's not that we're late to the trend, it's just that we're late to the protections aspect of it.
We are always early to the party. It's just that the protection that we need, whether it's really there.
Exactly. I think that is a little bit of a main focus of our discussion right now. So you mentioned that while we don't have a dedicated legislature that is focusing on artificial intelligence and its threats and the protections related to that, we do have multiple key legislatures that could actually help address certain threats that may arise when it comes to intellectual property protection, content protection, manipulation of evidence, as you mentioned, the Penal Code, the Data Protection Act. So could you please explain to us, or actually point out to us, where you believe are the strongest pieces of legislature that might actually be involved in any future artificial intelligence related cases that might pop up in Sri Lanka?
So one of the first things is intellectual property, because content creation can be outsourced to AI essentially. I think that is a area where copyright is a serious issue, mainly copyright, but also we might have situations where the AI tech is so advanced that it could be used to develop various technologies which requires patenting, for example, and whether who is the owner to various questions might arise, and also there could be competing claims on it on the basis that this system was developed by X, system was developed by Y, and therefore the technology that's developed belongs to X or Y due to the fact that the AI belongs to somebody. So various issues, but at the end of the day, I think other than for the clear intellectual property rights aspect, data protection also becomes very necessary for us to consider. That's simply because, for example, an AI can't work in a vacuum. Information has to be fed. For example, let's say it's a business model that AI is developing, running. The business model would require, take for example a supermarket. It wants to analyze the trends, which would also mean that the customer information has to be fed. Customer X bought sardine, parippu, something, something, something. Customer Y bought X, Y, and Z. And that information will be fed. Whether they would use customer X's personal details so that it can be personalized, or whether it was wiped out so that it was not personalized and his personal data was protected, all these become relevant. We might not think that it is, or we might not even realize that it is. So how those are delivered back to us, how those promotions, advertisements are delivered back to us, all of this falls within the data protection aspect. Then also crime, for example. One could artificially create a scenario, do a printout of it, and say that X committed this crime. Deep fakes can be created. I think there was this serious issue about some actress, Indian actress.
Recently, yes.
That's right, a few months ago. Deep fake. And imagine the plight of that innocent person whose reputation gets affected, who might get arrested for commission of a crime. The mental trauma, leave all that aside. You might get arrested, you might get remanded. For example, for murder, the magistrate might not be able to, when you're accused of murder, the magistrate might not be able to grant you bail. And that's the law. So imagine, due to a deep fake, you are accused of committing a murder and you are arrested, you are remanded. And how long would that whole process take to clarify? So the penal laws, evidentiary value of documents, all of this becomes questionable. For example, fake documents could be created. Fake signatures could be created. So we are entering an era where the genuineness of digital documentation
Is at risk.
is at risk. And while just saying this in my head, I was thinking there's this matter that I'm personally concerned with, where it's a lot of digital evidence. So it could become a problem.
Specifically when it comes to the digital evidence aspect
That's the
as
thing.
well.
So all these things have to be considered, and I believe that the legislature, as well as the relevant ministries that are involved in this, the ICTA to the Ministry of Justice to various other aspects, all of them must get together and instead of doing something with a knee-jerk reaction, get the stakeholders involved, get the experts involved, hear competing arguments for and against certain provisions of the law, and come up with something good. So that's where we should head.
Right. There's a discussion that needs to be had when it comes to actually considering the threats posed by AI and how to actually fend against it, specifically when it comes to, as you mentioned, the evidential aspect. I mean, content protection and intellectual property rights is important, but then again, as you mentioned, there could be outright manipulation of evidence and therefore wrongful arrests happening. So it's a much more serious situation than I believe our viewers might actually be considering, because when we think about AI, we usually 90% of the time only think about generative AI, because that is the platform that normal humans, that laymen basically interact with the most, specifically, even when it comes to write-ups or tasks, menial tasks that need to be done. Generative AI is what we actually interact with. Apart from generative AI, do you believe, sir, as you mentioned now, the personalization of certain processes that comes with the risk, the breach of your privacy and your personal information, do you believe that there is a bigger threat posed in that aspect than the whole generative AI area?
So I think generative AI, if we really look at it, even let's say writing a thesis, it could be trained to write your thesis for you by feeding in the information that is necessary. And examiners might find it difficult to, for example, see whether this is the actual content that is created, authored by the candidate. So plagiarism becomes a problem. Also, there was a situation where a US attorney had used some AI program to write a submission for him, and it had created a false case report to suit the question. So you see, at the end of the day, it's generative AI also is a problem, and when you look at larger schemes like AI that is developed for medical activities, research, to various things, all of these at the end of the day poses the same concern. That is whether it's not in the sense of what we have seen in Terminator, where we get taken over, but in the sense whether our day-to-day activities are made wrong by it. So that risk is always there. So I don't personally know well enough to say whether what is worse than the other, but I could say as a whole, all of them have their inherent risks, much like many other technologies. So I can't say that no, we should shy away from it, but of course we have to be concerned with the limitations that they give rise to.
Right, there's a difference between completely embracing a technology and actually learning how to navigate said technology without any blind faith in the software. I believe that is an adequate ending to our first segment. We do have quite a bit to discuss, specifically on an international aspect as well. We've seen a lot of regulations pop up recently. Before we get into any of that, let's go in for a short commercial break. You're watching Law, Land and Liberty. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Binit Sinimiratna and I'm an engineering student. My question is on international standards. How have other nations approached the regulation of AI?
Welcome back. You're watching Law, Land and Liberty. We were in conversation with attorney at law Thishya Weragoda. We were talking about artificial intelligence and how exactly it translates to the current context in Sri Lanka, specifically in the legislature aspects. And I believe our viewers heard a little bit of concerning information as well that we may not have thought to think about when it comes to the legal aspects and AI, since we don't really think about the domino effect that certain softwares and technologies can have. We were in discussion when it comes to the legal aspects and what threats and risks it could pose to us in the current context. Speaking of which, we actually did see quite a few reactions to AI over the course of the past few years across the globe. Fastest acting being, of course, EU, Europe. We saw a little bit of America's reactions as well. Sir, in a global context, how have you seen the translation of acceptance of AI and also the regulation of AI, sir?
So I think the EU is very much on the ball when it comes to technology. I think they are the basic trendsetter. So if we look at the EU, starting from the GDPR regime that came about in 2016 or 17, I can't remember the exact year on which it was made applicable, I think it was 2016. They've been pushing for new legislation on AI technology as well. And they have come up with a set of regulations on it. The US also is in the process. The thing with technologies of this nature is that it can't be homegrown to everyone. It has to be based on a common standard, I would say. Now, if we look at, for example, intellectual property, there is an international convention signed in, for copyright, for example. There is an international convention signed in 1883, the Berne Convention. So that sets out the basic guidelines for the rest of the world. And then eventually, in terms of the TRIPS agreement that was signed in the 1990s, copyright law and intellectual property law is more or less universal. Essentially, the entire gamut of intellectual property is now more or less universal. So similarly, I think for technologies of this nature, the applicability can't be very diverse from country to country, because the reactions or the effects of such technologies are not just felt in one country. What happens in the US with AI could have a serious impact on what's going on in Sri Lanka, for example. A scam could be run from the US on Sri Lankan soil. We might not have a law, but the US might have a law. So the prosecution might have to happen there. So for example, in such a situation, I think it's important that the laws are also uniform across the board. So maybe it's a good thing, like I said earlier, us being very slow to react. It's a good thing so that the laws can be settled in internationally. Maybe there'll be a convention in a few years' time. Maybe we'll make the laws that meet that minimum standard. So it might be a good thing.
Right.
But internationally, if we really look at it, it's, for the moment, it's mostly the the EU that's in the forefront of coming up with laws that addresses the problems or the issues that arise out of AI.
On that topic, sir, do you believe now, with EU's introduction to regulation, do you believe that the regulation was actually sure in itself and was stringent and specific enough, or do you believe that it's more vague in order to have some leeway for any potential developments in the software?
So when it comes to technology, laws are generally vague, but it's not vague to a level where nobody understands it. especially if there are punishments attached to it. But it leaves room for the technology to breathe. Because laws are made prospectively based on a particular date, it has to, especially when it comes to technology, it has to leave room to breathe. And that's why sometimes we see that, especially in a country like Sri Lanka, we'd see that the law says the minister may make regulations. So to combat particular situations, the Act empowers the minister to make regulations, which will be later on approved by the Parliament. So that sort of breathing space is necessary. And I believe that even the EU legislation that's there gives that sort of breathing space. And especially in the EU, there's nearly 26 countries. So each of their own concerns also have to be agreed upon. So which means that there's a lot of consensus, a lot of experts coming in. So I think that they come up with some brilliant laws because of that reason.
Right. Do you believe that the law is comprehensive in its own nature, or do you think that we can see a future where this specific regulation that was just introduced start to fall behind at the, compared to the rate?
It might, but the good thing about the EU, the UK and the US is that their laws are updated pretty fast.
Very fast.
So if there is a problem, the amendment will come very soon. It won't take another 20 years. So that's reality. So I don't think I'm an expert enough to comment as to the potentiality of the EU law, but what I can say is that they are generally very comprehensive.
Right. So
because they've got like 100 professors in law working on such a draft.
Right, and also the scale of how the legislature actually acts on varying nations in the bloc. So we can, safe to say, we can see this is, so far as we have seen in the global context, one of the most comprehensive legislatures specifically relating to artificial intelligence, despite the US actually mentioning such a regulation earlier on, before the EU actually enacted anything of the nature. We see that it's more fast acting on that in that block specifically. When it comes to the actually comparison between the US and the EU, of course we can't really get into specifics because we're not in their jurisdictions, and there's it's a whole other can of worms, of course. But where do you see the most fast-acting response when it comes to this developing technology? Do you think that the legislatures that were proposed and also in development compared to the ones that have already been put out by certain regions of the world, are they absolutely varying nature? You just mentioned previously as well that we need a global standard in order to universalize and stabilize the climate for artificial intelligence and have a hard line essentially when it comes to the software. So do we see a lot of differences, drastic differences when it comes to how countries approach artificial intelligence?
I have not gone through the US proposal in order to say that which is better.
Right.
And I don't think I have sufficient knowledge on that area. But I think the bottom line is, at the end of the day, how courts interpret it, whether it's the ECJ or the Supreme Court of UK or whether it's the Supreme Court of the US, generally the underlying principles are one and the same. They would take into consideration the rights of the citizens, for example, the right to privacy, right freedom of speech. All of those also will be considered at the appropriate stages. So unlike in Sri Lanka, where once it's law, the Supreme Court's power to say that this is unconstitutional is taken away, in those countries, even after 100 years, if they feel that this is unconstitutional for violation of freedom of speech or whatever the right, it can be struck down. Similar provisions are available in the EU also. So what we need to realize is that though we might feel that this is great, one of those Supreme Courts might later on say, no, that violates a particular fundamental right and therefore it should not be permitted.
Right.
And we've seen that in the US. For example, the Communications Decency Act of 1996, which brought about content regulation, especially adult content regulation. The Supreme Court struck down many clauses saying that they are unconstitutional abridgment of freedom of speech. But nearly 20 years later, the Sri Lankan government tried to enact a law which had those provisions that were struck down already. So I think we must be very realistic about what's going on. So even in those countries, the laws will get struck down sometimes. So we can't really say that, yeah, that country is the best. But we can look at things and then come to an understanding that some of those laws have good provisions that we can look at.
Right. So actually, bringing it to a local context, just like you mentioned, sir, do you believe that Sri Lanka will have the capability and the capacity to actually match up with the global standards that have been set for regulation of AI in this country?
So I think we have to, because we are a country where there's a lot of tech support going out. The tech industry in our country is very large. It's growing. And if we want to support that industry, we must have laws that are equally good as those of the EU and the US and the UK maybe. Because otherwise what will happen is that we sit back and we wait, and those countries might not be accepting technology that's developed in countries like Sri Lanka.
We'll lose our integrity.
Not just that, we lose opportunity because, for example, the GDPR compliance, that had a severe impact on our industry. And our industry immediately became compliant with GDPR. We are 3,000 miles away from the EU, but we don't have a choice. So similarly, whether we like it or not, our industries might actually comply with some of those EU requirements.
So
because they're servicing there.
Right.
So at the end of the day, we might need localization, but we will also need laws and regulations that cover those aspects.
Right. Well, unfortunately, that was quite a lengthy discussion as well. We're going to have to cut this segment short a little bit because we do have a lot more to discuss, specifically when it comes to the future of AI in Sri Lanka, not just the legislative aspect, but how we will see it effectively addressing, and also interacting with our people and our, specific ground situation, and how it could essentially change the way that Sri Lankans do things. Before we get into any of the discussions on the future of AI in Sri Lanka, let's go in for a short commercial break. You're watching Lawland and Liberty. We'll be right back.
Hello, my name is Oshirina Nyakara and I'm an IT student. My question is on future laws. How can Sri Lanka aim to protect against abuse of artificial intelligence?
Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We are in our final segment in discussion with Attorney at Law Thishya Weragoda. Sir, this was quite a packed discussion. We spoke about all the what ifs, what could be's, because we don't really have a legislature, but exactly what threats are posed. Specifically on the legislative aspect, now we just finished speaking about the global standards and what standards we might have to meet in the future, and also how other nations are actually reacting to artificial intelligence in the legislative aspect. When it comes to the actual lawmaking process, we see that there is a lot of consensus in other nations relating to how it should be approached and the sensitivity of the matter. How exactly do you believe we should be approaching the legislative, the legislation surrounding artificial intelligence and its and protection against or from it, even to properly utilize? How exactly should we be talking about it on a local level?
So I think that it has to be entirely consultative, and it can't be a group of lawyers or handpicked bunch of experts coming and drafting something. It has to be more public oriented. Maybe people have to be asked to give their opinion on it, suggestions for the law, so that proposals can be made. One thing I see in Sri Lankan legislative process is that there is sometimes very little consultation from the experts and the real stakeholders. We see quite often that bills are presented to Parliament, tabled in Parliament, and then challenged in the Supreme Court, and then withdrawn. Or serious amendments are being proposed at that stage. So which begs the question, are these laws properly consultatively made? Especially on an area like this is a very niche area. The real experts, the real stakeholders, and the real people who are concerned with this should be given an opportunity of making the suggestions. Otherwise, I feel that we will be in a situation where, like the Online Safety Act that we have, it might be half-baked, it might cause a lot of problems, and might be very regressive in application. So we don't want such a situation. The idea of laws that apply to AI is not to have a chilling effect or making people be scared of using it, but encouraging people to do it. So that environment has to be created by whatever this law. So I think it's important that all those things are considered if and when the government decides to intervene in this area.
Right, when and if, very large words that we have to actually wait and see if there is going to be specific action taken up on it and addressed in the future. As you mentioned, it could be several years down the line, but regardless, when the process does in fact kick off and happen, there should be a consultation with the public, because the stakeholders, of course, the law is going to be drafted for the protection of the people of Sri Lanka. Therefore, there needs to be a good discussion when it comes to the actual legislative aspects, as you mentioned, sir. This leads me to another question of curiosity. So how do you see the aspects of software that is artificial intelligence, the technology that is artificial intelligence, how do you see it being further proliferated in the Sri Lankan context? Do we see a future where we are completely integrated to the technology, or do you see a rift in the future? How do you think the public will react to further integration?
Whether we like it or not, it is here to stay, like I said. And our industries will have to embrace AI. For example, industries which have R&D on nanotechnology to various things will obviously use AI-based development work. None of us are ever going to say, no, you shouldn't. But at the same time, there will be other industries, other activities, human activities also, where AI will play a significantly large role. I mean, none of us ever thought that when we write text to the hospital to get medical records, it will be an automated process where an AI-based chatbot is going to give us our medical records back. But it is what it is. We wouldn't have thought of that 10 years ago. But that is where we are now. So protecting ourselves is one aspect. Encouraging the development of such technologies is also another aspect. So these two competing interests must be balanced at some point. And I think whether we like it or not, the tech industry in Sri Lanka will also have to, we have already embraced it, and it will continue to embrace it, because they serve and service various employers outside of Sri Lanka. and we can't be the only frog in the well, so to speak. So the laws will develop, the industry will develop, the technology will develop, and whether we like it or not, a law will have to be developed.
Right. In the future, we will, whether we like it or not, we will have to actually try and adapt to the evolving situation, and the further we push back from it, the further down the well we will go. I think this is, since we're slowly nearing the end of this discussion, unfortunately, I'd like to ask you, sir, specifically when it comes to the viewers watching at home, as an individual, on an individual level, what are things we can do to further educate ourselves on this situation and to essentially not just protect ourselves but to be informed about this situation?
So if you look at social media even, you see so many advertisements on AI-based writing apps to various things, saying, you can do your work using this. If you want to, for example, summarize an article, you have a solution. Simple things. So people are naturally going to, at the end of the day, get into using these technologies. Very few people might think that, no, I'm not going to register for one of these technologies and do my homework. But we have to be cautious. We have to read the fine print sometimes. Unfortunately, the fine print runs to about 100 pages. Right. That's the doing of lawyers.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So that's what lawyers are paid for, to make it incomprehensible as possible. The reality is that we need to accept that AI will play a role. We have to be very careful in what information we give to the AI. Whether those websites are safe, whether those websites are going to sell my personal details or not, whether those websites seem legitimate. Those are things that us at home must look at before we just go and click on something. I would say that this is common sense, but sometimes common sense is not so common. And we go and do some things that later on we are like, why have I done this? So in that sense, I think it's important that back at home, before we click yes to signing up for one of these things, we must try to understand whether this is safe. And if it's asking for our personal information a little bit too much, it's asking for my credit card number or my phone number a little bit too much, then probably should be worried about it. Exactly.
No blind faith, basically.
No blind faith. And I think sometimes we must also understand that there is room for false positives as well as false negatives in answers. So just because some AI told me so, it doesn't become true.
Right.
Because the AI might have been fed some wrong information.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out. So in that sense, even if you find it, maybe it might be a good thing to do your own research to verify it.
I think that is absolutely the perfect point for us to, unfortunately, end this discussion. We have to actually consider our individuality in the entire process. It's not just, if it's mentioned by AI or done through AI, it's not like it's a fail-safe process or fail-proof process, and we'll see some sort of miraculous recovery from any sort of situation that we're in, that we try to employ artificial intelligence for. Unfortunately, sir, our time has come to an end. Thank you very much for taking the time to actually educate our viewers on the foundations and the basics of interacting with AI, as well as what the legal aspects and the legal climate looks like for AI in Sri Lanka and also across the globe. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, artificial intelligence is a technology that may seem to pose a threat to human ingenuity. However, it is an inevitable reality and, on the optimistic side, may even be used to better the protection of humanity. We leave you tonight with the words of computer scientist Fei Li. Artificial intelligence is not a substitute for human intelligence. It is a tool to amplify human creativity and ingenuity. That's all we have for you tonight on Law, Land and Liberty. If you had missed any of today's programs, you can always rewatch by catching us on on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/OtherThanEnglish. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good night.